can't quite recall the last time my daughter called me Mom with tenderness. Perhaps it was on her 7th birthday when she hugged me in the kitchen and whispered, "I love you more than anything." Or maybe it was that morning she got into college when I held her tightly at the airport, unaware that embrace would be the final threshold of unconditional love. But I remember vividly the day she said to me, "Go live in a dump. You don't belong in my life anymore." That was the day I turned 70. A 70-year-old mother, a $300 million contract, and a sentence like a dagger from her own daughter. Go live in a dump. What do you think she did next? Divided the assets as planned? Or quietly erased her daughter's name from everything and began to fight back? Don't take your eyes off this story, and don't forget to subscribe to the She Stories Margaret channel, because this story is more than you think. That morning, I woke up early as usual. I prepared ginger tea and toasted the walnut bread Rachel used to love as a child. I had planned to invite her over to sign the asset transfer agreement, a real estate project I'd nurtured for over 15 years, recently valued at $300 million by an investment group from Singapore. I intended to share 50% of the benefits with her, not because I believed she deserved it, but because I once believed that blood ties are sacred, and a mother shouldn't take everything to the grave. If you're still listening, this is just the beginning. Rachel arrived nearly an hour late, stepping into the house in an expensive suit, her eyes scanning the place as if she were visiting a temporary model home. The loving gaze of the past was gone. No more affectionate "Mom," just a cold, indifferent tone. Still keeping these lace curtains? They look as outdated as this house. I smiled gently. Would you like some ginger tea? I just made it. She frowned. No thanks. I drink detox now. I pointed to the contract neatly placed on the table beside the still warm cup of tea. I wanted to discuss this with you. Rachel sat down, flipped through a few pages. After reading the first 3 lines, she let out a soft laugh, a sound I couldn't decipher as mocking or pitying. You want me to be involved? With these obscure land plots, you're offering me 50% ownership? I nodded. I don't need to keep it all. I just want to know you'll continue to cherish what your father and I have built. She pushed the papers back toward me. Mom, this is the 21st century. We don't live in emotional nostalgia. I have my job, my own house. I don't need these relics. I tried to stay calm. I'm not asking you to live in the past. I just want you to understand, I won't live forever. And if one day... Mom, she interrupted, if you think it's time to pass something on, it's best to donate it to charity or sell it and move into a retirement home peacefully. Holding on to it is like clinging to a pile of decaying assets. I was stunned. And then she said that sentence, the one I know will echo within me until my last breath. Mom, just go live in a dump. That's where people like you end up anyway. She stood up, grabbed her bag, and left as if she'd just attended a dull interview. No kiss on the cheek, no glance back. The door closed softly, but inside me, it was the sound of collapse. I sat motionless at the limed oak table George had built for me after he retired. The real estate blueprints, financial plans, investment analyses, all still intact. Everything I'd painstakingly built over nearly half a lifetime, dismissed in mere minutes like a damp, discarded flyer. I had considered calling Rachel back, to say she misunderstood. That wasn't my intention, that I wasn't forcing her to take on responsibilities, just hoping to see her continue the legacy. But then I remembered her eyes, her tone, and I knew there was nothing left to call back. That night, I dug through old emails where I'd once sent contracts to the Singapore representative lawyer. I reopened the trust account I had planned to establish under both my and Rachel's names. I pressed delete. I rewrote the entire contract, this time, and without her name, and I added a new clause. In the event of the founder's death, the sole beneficiary shall be the Whitmore Women's Shelter, a safe housing initiative for elderly mothers abandoned by their families. I signed. My hand did not tremble. 3 days later, I received a call from the investment director at AMK Singapore. We're pleased to confirm the revised contract, but may I ask, are you certain there's no heir in the family who should be included? I replied simply, I used to think so, but she crossed her own name out. That weekend, Rachel sent me a message, reluctant perhaps. Mom, sorry if I was too harsh the other day. I have a meeting next week with Tokyo investors. If you still want me on the deal, just send over the paperwork. I stared at the message, then turned off the screen. I opened the safe and took out the pearl necklace George gave me on our wedding day. I clasped it around my neck. Looking into the mirror, I didn't see a pitiful 70-year-old woman. I saw a woman who had just lost the daughter she once believed would inherit her heart. I called my personal lawyer, Joseph Fenner, an old friend from our Yale Law School days. "Joseph," I said firmly, "I want to transfer the majority of my assets into a trust. No family member is to access it while I'm alive, and when I pass, everything will be distributed for humanitarian purposes." Joseph was quiet for a moment, and then he asked, "Are you sure, Margaret?" I nodded, though he couldn't see it. "I'm more sure than I've ever been." 3 weeks later, headlines read, $300 million real estate deal finalized between Margaret Whitmore and AMK Singapore. Private contract. No heir representation included. Rachel called. Multiple times. No answer. She sent another message. "Why would you do this to me? That was supposed to be my future. Stop being so selfish." I didn't reply. I simply printed out the message, folded it, and tucked it inside my leather journal, so that one day, if I ever forgot how deeply I was wounded, I could read it again. I began a new habit. Every morning, I opened the balcony window, sipped peppermint tea, and wrote a short reflection in my brown leather journal. On the first page, I wrote, "My daughter once said, 'Go live in a dump.'" But what she didn't know is that she buried the most beautiful part of our relationship that day. I'm still living, just not anywhere I'm seen as a burden. I used to think the greatest betrayal of my life was when George passed without a farewell. No final note, no handwritten will, not even a last message. But I was wrong. Silent death is easier to forgive than a living child treating her mother like just another name at the bottom of a contract. Rachel came back, not to apologize, but to reclaim what I had once wanted to give her out of love. It all started with an email that seemed harmless at first, sent to the official inbox of the company I founded, Whitmore Legacy and Land Trust. Subject: Urgent. Request to delay. Execution of contract number 0881-B sender. Rachel at WLCapital.org. I squinted. WL Capital. I'd never heard of it. I opened the email. The content was brief. "We represent Ms. Rachel Whitmore, co-founder of WL Capital, and formally request a halt on all asset transfer procedures related to real estate parcel 12P under the AMK Singapore Agreement, citing potential inheritance discrepancies and unresolved beneficiary disputes." At the bottom was a digital signature from a young attorney, Chase Lindstrom, Esquire. I sat frozen in place. Rachel, my own daughter, had just officially launched a legal offensive against me. I called Joseph, my lawyer, my voice trembling. "She's suing me." He paused for a moment, then said firmly, "Not a direct lawsuit. She's using delay tactics, trying to freeze the asset transfer, pressuring AMK to renegotiate the deal." I rose from my chair. My knuckles whitened as I gripped the edge of the desk. She started her own company just to reverse the contract we once planned to sign together?" "Worse," Joseph replied. "WL Capital was incorporated exactly 2 weeks after she walked out of your house on your birthday. The legal name is Whitmore Legal Capital Holdings. She's playing financial politics now, Margaret." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I went to my filing cabinet and pulled out every document George and I had prepared for unpredictable situations like this. I reread the old agreement, the one that had Rachel's name right next to mine. I remembered how, on that day, she had said, "I don't need the inheritance, Mom. Keep it." And now, just because she heard that AMK valued the deal at over $300 million, she returned like a cold-blooded attorney, not to collaborate, but to seize everything. I decided to go to the WL Capital office. No appointment, no warning. The building stood tall and glassy in a newly developed tech district, modern, sterile, and as foreign to me as my daughter's new persona. I wore a beige trench coat, a felt hat, and sunglasses. No one recognized me as Margaret Whitmore, the once renowned Land Trust founder. The receptionist asked whom I was here to see. "Rachel Whitmore," I said plainly. "Tell her her mother is waiting downstairs." 15 minutes later, Rachel emerged, her eyes wide for a brief moment. Then she snapped back into that polished, powerful, and distant version of herself. "You didn't need to come all the way here, Mom. You could have just read the email." I removed my sunglasses and looked her straight in the eyes. "I wanted to hear it from your mouth. Are you suing me over this?" Rachel shrugged. "I'm not suing you. I'm simply protecting the legal rights of an heir." "Heir," I repeated, emphasizing each syllable. "You rejected everything. You told me to go live in a dump, and now you come back calling yourself an heir." She didn't flinch. "You're still my mother. I'm still your daughter. The law doesn't say feelings decide legal entitlements." I laughed, though it was a sound I barely recognized in myself. Not mocking, just bitter. You used the Whitmore name to start a company, filed objections against your own mother, and you feel no shame. She folded her arms. I have nothing to be ashamed of. You were the one who pushed me out of the deal. I'm just reclaiming what's rightfully mine. And trust me, outsiders will think you're old, possibly senile, and being manipulated into selling off your assets. I'm saving your image. I turned away, saying nothing. But in my mind, a decision had already solidified, not out of anger, but because I knew one thing for certain. I wouldn't allow myself to be used as a prop to build a polished narrative for someone who had discarded me like a used dish rag. That evening, when I got home, I opened my safe, pulled out the full portfolio of my trust accounts, and I began to act. I transferred control of all asset accounts to a private trust firm based in Reykjavik, Iceland, a country where top-tier financial confidentiality laws are rigorously enforced. I authorized Joseph to carry out the complete legal severance of all financial ties between Rachel and me. Every link, every insurance policy, every contingency reserve was legally restructured within 72 hours. The next day, I received an email from Rachel. I just got notified by the trust. What right do you have to unilaterally pull all my shares from the inheritance record? I didn't respond by email. I sent a paper envelope, no return address. Inside was a copy of the International Asset Transfer Order. On the final page, I handwrote one sentence. A mother can give away everything, but a mother also has the right to take it back when all that's left is a knife in her back. Rachel showed up that night. Her eyes were red, lips trembling. Are you really going through with this? Do you want to cut me out of your life? I looked at her for a long time. Then I said, I'm not cutting you out of my life. I'm cutting out the betrayal. I used to think the most painful moments were already behind me, that once your daughter betrays you, takes you to court, cuts ties, nothing else can really hurt anymore. But life rarely stops at a single fall. The real pain is realizing that the cracks didn't start today. They've been there, quiet, growing, decades old, hiding right inside the home you once believed was unbreakable, and the first person to strike the match might not have been Rachel. I stumbled upon that truth one chilly March morning, with Boston still clinging to the tail end of winter. I had gone to the old storage unit to retrieve a few things, paintings, old school journals, a few of my teaching binders. I didn't expect to find George's journal. It was tucked deep inside a worn wooden crate labeled G. Whitmore, Old Records. A small leather-bound box sat at the bottom. I nearly ignored it until I noticed a note tucked on top in George's slanted cursive. Do not read if I'm still alive. My hand froze. I opened it. Each line was a paper cut to the heart. Not because George spoke ill of me, but because he wrote truths I should have known. Truths I deserved to know. May 2nd, 1996. Rachel has been pulling away from Margaret. She told me she hates how her mom controls everything from the curtain colors to what school she goes to. I want to defend my wife, but I'm tired of how Margaret turns everything into a perfect mother performance. September 18th, 2002. Rachel has no idea Margaret turned down an art scholarship to stay home while she battled pneumonia. Would she see her mother differently if she knew? November 4th, 2010. I never told Margaret I used our joint retirement funds on a failed venture capital deal. I registered the investment under Rachel's name to keep it off the radar. I swore I'd recover it, but guilt eats me alive. I collapsed onto the cold storage floor, the journal clenched in my hands. George, my husband, the man I thought was always transparent, had hidden this. And Rachel? She was the listed beneficiary of that failed investment? I kept flipping through the pages. Then I found a line that made my breath catch. If I die first, Margaret will never find the Cayman account. But Rachel might. I left clues in the purple dusk at Palos Verdes painting, the one place we were last happy together. I didn't wait. I rushed home, tore through the old painting room, and found it. Purple Dusk at Palos Verdes, the piece George painted in 2007 after our last family vacation together. Behind the wooden frame, sealed with candle wax, was a piece of foil. I gently pried it open. Inside, an aged photocopy, a sequence of numbers, a foreign bank name, an initial login code. I immediately sent it to Joseph. 4 days later, he confirmed it. The Cayman account was real, still active, registered under joint holders, George Whitmore and Rachel Whitmore. The amount inside, $42.2 million. The original seed money, $5 million. George didn't lose the money. He hid it, and the only one who knew was my daughter. I called Rachel. Did you know about the Cayman account? Silence. You've been listed on it since 2010. You stayed quiet all this time. Why? Then she said something that made me feel like a stranger in the story of my own life. Dad said, you'd ruin it. That you'd blow it all on things like libraries, old house museums, or some preservation fund. He said I could turn it into something real. I hung up. I didn't cry. But something inside me crumbled harder than anything before. It wasn't just betrayal from my daughter. It was exile from the trust of the man I loved most. I didn't sleep for 3 nights. Then one morning, I stood before George's altar, lit a single stick of incense, and whispered, George, if you really believed I wasn't worthy of knowing, I'm sorry. But if you left all this for Rachel without giving me a chance to understand, then you were wrong, and I'm going to fix it. I started moving. I had Joseph file a petition to freeze the Cayman account under the grounds of unsettled inheritance dispute. As the legal spouse, and with no will ever made public, I had standing. I sent the request through Zurich, the regional hub managing Cayman-linked offshore assets. I hired a US-based private audit firm to investigate all transactions from that account in the last 10 years. That's when we found it. Rachel had quietly funneled $2 million into launching WL Capital, her company, her lawsuits, all funded by unreported family money. A week later, she appeared at my gate. No notice. No lawyers. What do you want? Money, she snapped. I looked her in the eye. I want you to stop. Stop calling me a burden. Stop trampling what your father left behind, and stop thinking money is what makes you a person. She scoffed. You always lived in the past, but you forget, Dad believed in me more than he did in you. I didn't argue. I just said, if you really believe Dad chose you over me, then look at the legacy you're holding and ask yourself, why is it that I'm the one still holding on, all while you keep trying to take? I used to believe revenge was the act of the weak trying to prove their strength, but after being betrayed by my daughter, lied to by the man I shared decades with, and watching every ounce of trust torn to shreds, I learned something else. Sometimes, resistance isn't about revenge. It's about survival. And for a woman at 70 like me, surviving isn't just about breathing. It's about holding on to dignity, memory, and the name I carved into every wooden beam of this house. After that silent showdown with Rachel, I didn't reach out again. I didn't block her number, didn't write letters, didn't scream to the press or publish exposés. I simply started clearing things out, quietly, coldly, deliberately, because I knew Rachel wouldn't stop. To her, losing face meant losing everything, and people who survive on power don't quit, they just redirect. So I had to get ahead. I reached out to someone Rachel would never expect, Maggie Holt, her former best friend from law school at Cambridge, someone who'd cut ties with Rachel years ago for reasons unknown. I asked to meet her at a small cafe, the same place George and I once held our first art exhibit. Maggie looked at me cautiously, but when I slid over a copy of the Cayman account bearing Rachel's name and documentation from WL Capital showing Maggie had once been listed as a legal advisor in the early days, her expression shifted. You're pulling me into this? She asked. I didn't answer directly. Instead, I handed her a handwritten note from George, his familiar slanted writing, if I'm ever gone, Maggie will know what to do. It was tucked inside the same envelope as his journal. I didn't understand it before, but now I did. 3 days later, Maggie sent me a confidential report, nearly 70 pages long, outlining the entire financial structure of WL Capital. What she uncovered shocked even me. Rachel had been siphoning funds from the Cayman account for 5 consecutive years under the guise of an investment trust. She funneled the money into shell companies, all secretly controlled by her and a close circle of associates. The most damning part, traces of money laundering through fake innovation centers, including one fabricated tech hub with a false $10 million expense line. Maggie looked me straight in the eye. If this goes public, Rachel could lose her license, face a tax investigation, maybe even criminal charges. I paused. I don't want her in prison, I said. I just want her to stop, for good. I handed everything to Joseph, my most trusted lawyer. I want everything moved to international protection. No individual, not even my daughter, should be able to touch it. Joseph nodded. We'll establish a sovereign trust, run by an independent board. No family connections. Every link Rachel once had to your estate, your contracts, even her former entitlements, will be nullified. I signed. My hand didn't tremble. At the same time, I quietly moved out of my house. No one knew where I went. I disabled iPhone tracking, switched to a call-only flip phone, visited the bank at 7 a.m., left before most people even opened shop. No photos, no headlines. just silence. But each silent step stripped away another piece of my daughter's hold on my legacy. On day 14, Rachel noticed, she sent floods of emails, calls, messages, all met with silence. Finally, she showed up at the Foundation's headquarters, where I once held the title of honorary chair. I was signing the papers to officially step down when I heard the commotion in the lobby. A staff member whispered, "Rachel Whitmore is demanding to see you." I walked out. For the first time in years, she wasn't wearing bright red lipstick, no Dior dress, just swollen eyes, a raspy voice. "What the hell are you doing?" she said. "You're destroying my future." I looked at her. "You destroyed it yourself. I'm just cleaning up the mess you left behind." "What do you want? You want me to kneel and apologize?" I said nothing. I turned my back. But before leaving, I said, "You told me to go live in a dump. But what you didn't realize is that your heart is where the real garbage piled up." That night, I left the Whitmore house, alone, no farewells, no tears, just me, a suitcase, and a USB drive holding every piece of evidence, should Rachel ever dare come at me again. I rented a modest apartment on a hill in Palos Verdes, overlooking the sea. I called it the Blue Study, a place where only I and my freedom exist. I once believed I'd never set foot in a courtroom. At 70, I imagined a life of peace, reading, gardening, reminiscing about my late husband, and sharing stories with grandchildren about cherry blossom seasons past, not sitting in a high court, facing my own daughter, the same one who once fell asleep on my lap, accusing me of exploiting family ties to manipulate assets. But there I was, with no other choice. The trial commenced in Boston at the end of July. Plaintiff, Rachel Whitmore, represented by attorney Chase Lindstrom and WL Capital, suing me to revoke my control over the trust fund, reinstate Rachel's inheritance rights as a legal offspring, investigate my mental competence due to age. I remained silent during the accusations. But Joseph, my attorney, did not. "Your Honor," he began, "Mrs. Margaret Whitmore is not only mentally competent, but also a victim of a series of asset abuses, document forgeries, money laundering, and psychological attacks by the defendant." The courtroom was tense. Rachel sat opposite me, cold, avoiding eye contact. Our first witness was Maggie Holt. She entered in a crisp white blouse, hair neatly tied, carrying a 150-page dossier analyzing WL Capital's internal finances. Each line she read was a blow to my daughter's reputation. Unexplained withdrawals, dubious investments in shell companies, a virtual tech center project with no physical office, money transfers through intermediaries, Rachel herself under an alias. Rachel's lawyer countered, "Ms. Holt had personal conflicts with the defendant. She has motives for revenge." Maggie calmly replied, "My only motive is the truth." Our second witness was unexpected. The European Regional Director of Helgar and Sons Bank, confirming the Cayman account George left behind. He presented a decade's worth of transaction history. On the big screen, a staggering figure appeared. Unauthorized withdrawals by Rachel, $60,000. Rachel looked up, visibly shaken for 5 seconds, then composed herself. "My father co-owned that account with me. He trusted me," she asserted. Then, the first twist. Joseph stepped forward. "Your Honor, we present a video testament from Mr. George Whitmore, recorded a month before his passing, stored securely by his attorney." On screen, George appeared, gray-haired, eyes dim, but voice clear. "I created this account to protect our family. If Margaret discovers it, I was wrong to hide it. If Rachel withdraws funds without disclosure, I was wrong to trust her. If both occur, I can only apologize to the woman who sacrificed her life for me." The courtroom fell silent. I sat still. My hands were cold, but my heart illuminated. Rachel began to unravel. She argued, blamed others, claimed she was forced into the role of financial provider for aging parents. I didn't react. I'd reacted enough, with all the silence I possessed. The second twist came when Joseph called our third witness, someone no one expected, James Hartley, Rachel's ex-husband. He entered, holding an old phone, stating, "I have a recording Rachel sent me 2 years ago when she started WL Capital," through the speaker. "My mom thinks I'm ungrateful. I'll show her. This asset will bear my name, but publicly, it'll be under the guise of, for the community. Once she signs the transfer, I'll move everything to the Singapore account. No one can stop me." Rachel screamed in court, "You can't use that." "It's a private recording." The judge banged the gavel. "The recording is admissible in cases investigating financial fraud involving public assets." I didn't look at Rachel anymore. I'd watched her for 34 years, watched her cry over her first failed math test, watched her smile in her wedding dress, watched her turn away without a goodbye. Now, I looked at myself in the courtroom's reflective wall. A mother no longer young, no longer easily hurt, no longer deluded. The trial concluded after 6 days. The court ruled, dismissed all of Rachel Whitmore's claims, affirmed Margaret Whitmore's sole ownership of the trust and AMK contract, ordered WL Capital to compensate $30.6 million for breaching trust agreements, referred Rachel's case to federal tax and money laundering investigators. Rachel didn't cry. She stood there, looking at me as if she still couldn't grasp what had happened. "You've won, Mom. Are you happy now?" I didn't respond. I simply said, "I didn't win. I just survived." They say peace comes after the storm, but no one ever taught me that after an emotional hurricane, what's left might not be peace, but emptiness. No more court hearings, no more threats from Rachel's lawyers, no more familiar footsteps of my daughter climbing the wooden stairs each morning. Just me, alone in a sunlit but cold penthouse, staring at an old glass jar filled with the ashes of memories that were never properly buried. I rearranged my study. George's old desk still held the warm scent of walnut wood. I placed an old photo on it, Rachel at 7, face smeared with birthday cake, beaming between George and me. We used to be a family. Not perfect, but not dishonest, or so I believed. It had been nearly a month since the trial. I hadn't called Rachel. I didn't take any calls either. My new number was handled by Joseph with high-level security. Only 3 people knew it: Joseph, Maggie, and Lucas Thorne. Lucas was the only person I allowed into my silence. He visited every Thursday afternoon, always bringing flaxseed muffins and a different old book. Today it's Letters Never Sent. Have you read it? I shook my head. Not yet. But the title... It sounds painful, Lucas smiled. Sometimes pain is just proof we once meant it. I began writing again. Not to attack, not to grieve, but to remember. Every morning, I jotted something small. Like this. Day 12 after the trial. I still don't know why Rachel didn't cry. Or maybe she did, but no one was left to see it. Day 15. I opened the old library. There was a letter, delivered by hand. No sender. Shaky handwriting. If I was wrong, you can tell me. But please don't shut the door. I didn't respond. I wasn't sure if the letter was truly from Rachel, or just a breeze from the ghost of the past slipping through the cracks. But I kept it. Pressed between page 245 of The Winter Vault by Anne Michaels. One rainy morning, not a crashing summer storm, but a soft drizzle, as if the sky had aged with me. I sat in the reading room, staring out over the bay. And I asked myself, if one day Rachel returns, standing at the door, not with lawyers, not wearing her $5,000 trench coat or Cartier watch, but just a girl with messy hair, no makeup, and empty hands, what would I do? The answer came on a Thursday. Lucas arrived late, but he brought an envelope. Inside was a copy of the withdrawal notice from Rachel's secondary appeal. She'd dropped the case. No more lawsuits. No appeals. He handed me a USB. "You should watch this." I plugged it in. A video. Just under 3 minutes. Rachel, sitting alone in a dim room. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just don't want to keep living with the feeling that I erased you from my life with a few signatures. I tried to prove I was strong, but all I proved was that I became a talking shadow saying what others taught me. I don't know how to fix this, but if you still have the photo from my 7th birthday, maybe I'm still somewhere in your heart. The screen went dark. I cried, not loudly, not violently, just tears I couldn't stop, not because I forgave her, but because I realized I still felt, and feeling, that can't be faked. That night, I stepped onto the balcony with a wooden chair, a cup of jasmine tea, and a fresh sheet of paper. I wrote, "Rachel, I can't forget what you did, but I can't ignore what we once were either. I'm not opening the door, but I'm not locking it. If one day you return, not to demand, but to understand, then I'll be here, not to judge, but to ask, are you hungry? And if the answer is yes, I'll reheat the seaweed soup you used to love. Mom." I placed the letter in a plain white envelope with no address. I stored it in the drawer, next to the birthday photo and the letter Rachel wrote in 3rd grade, clumsily scribbled, "Mom, you are my sunshine." I don't know if I will forgive, but I do know this. I haven't let the anger turn me into what I feared most, a mother with no more love to give. There are betrayals that kill a part of us, not because we lost money or homes or inheritances, but because we lost the illusion that family is unbreakable. As mothers, we believe that if we love enough, give enough, our children will understand. But love doesn't guarantee kindness. Blood doesn't guarantee gratitude. Margaret didn't win because she was the smartest. She survived because she didn't let rage drag her into the mud of vengeance. She used law, memory, and silence to reclaim the most sacred thing of all, her dignity and her right to choose her own life. If you're in the same place, betrayed by your own, erased from the life you built, remember, forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's refusing to let them keep hurting you again. Stand up, quietly if you must, but firmly. You have the right to love and the right to walk away. If you've made it this far, I believe this story is no longer a stranger to you. Maybe someone you loved deeply turned their back on you. Maybe you stayed silent, afraid of losing your child, afraid of being called selfish. Maybe you've heard those painful words. You're old now. Just step aside. And if you've ever thought you were alone, you're not. At She Stories Margaret, we're here to tell your story for you. Leave a comment. Have you ever forgiven someone who didn't deserve it? Have your kindness or sacrifices ever been dismissed by your own family? We read every word, and we'll keep telling these stories for you and for the forgotten mothers still waiting to be heard. Tap like if you believe that being a mother doesn't mean being silent. Subscribe to She Stories Margaret for more powerful stories of women who may be quiet but are never weak, because some pain doesn't need to scream to shake the soul, and some mothers deserve to be heard by the whole world. This is a fictional story, not intended to offend or target anyone. It was created solely to convey a meaningful lesson to the viewer, and all character names are completely fictional.